Hello. Today is Tuesday, August the 25th, as we continue our journey toward the 13th Sunday after Pentecost, August the 30th, 2020. Today we take a moment and read the portion of the psalm that we'll be using on Sunday, and I can give you some reflections on that psalm. The psalm is number 26, verses 1 through 8. If you have that in front of you and you would like to have kind of a dialogue of sorts, I will read all of it, but you can respond with the even number text. Give judgment for me, O Lord, for I have lived with integrity. I have trusted in the Lord and have not faltered. Test me, O Lord, and try me. Examine my heart and my mind. For your steadfast love is before my eyes. I have walked faithfully with you. I have not sat with the worthless, nor do I consort with the deceitful. I have hated the company of evildoers. I will not sit down with the wicked. I will wash my hands in innocence, O Lord, that I may go in procession round your altar, singing aloud a song of thanksgiving and recounting all your wonderful deeds. Lord, I love the house in which you dwell and the place where your glory abides. This psalm is a prayer spoken by an individual as opposed to an entire congregation. It can be used at any time. That is, it's not connected to any specific festival or any kind of problems that Israel may have been having or anything at all, really. It's just a general prayer. The morally upright among us can echo the psalm's claim of integrity with confidence. The sinner can voice the willingness to be examined by Yahweh, God, and found innocent. And the words of this psalm can be spoken aloud before worship, certainly, yet they're equally valid to speak aloud in public places or at home or wherever an individual may feel like using this psalm. No matter who prays the psalm or how they pray it or where they pray it, the words convey an immensely active desire to act with integrity and to enjoy the promised relationship with Yahweh, with God. Psalm 26 as a whole makes a bold assertion about moral integrity in verses 3 through 5 and religious integrity in verses 6 through 8. And then in the verses that follow our section for today, the individual makes a confident statement of faith and a commitment to worship Yahweh in verse 12, which follows a second request from the individual for Yahweh to act on the individual's behalf, verses 9 through 11. Our section today, however, only focuses on the first three: the opening plea, evidence of moral integrity, and assurance of religious integrity. So confident in personal integrity and unwavering trust in God, the prayerful one anticipates Yahweh will render a verdict of innocence rather than guilt. This person's appeal to integrity does not presume a perfect life. We all know no one is perfect. What it is really saying is that they have a life that is part of a committed relationship of dependence on God alone, and in full participation, all the accepted means of renewal that God offers, the means of grace, as we Lutherans tend to call them. So there is some similarity in terms of how we open up our worship service with words of confession. We know we're not perfect, and sometimes there's even sins that we've committed that we don't even think about enough to confess, or don't even realize we did them. And at the same time, we're coming before God, knowing we are not perfect, and yet realizing that we are doing the best we can. So the praying person here sees the love of Yahweh, God, continually, not occasionally. Verse 3 says it's a steadfast love. So Yahweh's love is present no matter what happens. And Yahweh's commitment to becomes that motivation for the person to live and to act, or as it says in verse 3b, walk in the faithfulness of Yahweh, or in faithfulness to Yahweh. So there is a connection of faithfulness, even though there is not always perfect adherence to God's commands or God's law, as they would talk about in the Old Testament. Because the person is a praying person and is walking in faithfulness to Yahweh, the person is not sitting with the worthless, as it says in verse 4a, or the wicked, as it says in 5b. And the verb for sitting with means having a long-term or a settled relationship. So what the prayerful person is saying is that any relationships that they've had with someone who is a liar or someone who is a deceiver could be more comparable to those that Jesus maintained with sinners, for which even Jesus was criticized by the religious leaders. So Jesus does not teach us to shun sinners. Jesus teaches us to not conform to their sin or to the world. Rather, we are to set an example, a good example, of course, for them to use to change their ways. Verses 6 through 8 shift this person, this prayerful person's focus from moral integrity to religious integrity. And here the person creates a separation from the outside world through worship. What Paul would say is nonconformity. So the person moves from the everyday world that they live in with its moral challenges to the religious world, the world of worship, the world of proclamation of God's word, the world of being in Yahweh's presence. All of the readings for today have they hold in tension this world that we live in and God's world. So there is this sense of kind of a tension between the two because there are differences. God teaches one thing, the world teaches another thing. Jeremiah 15, as you heard in yesterday's message, requests that Yahweh's retribution be on those who persecute him, in verse 15 of that section. Romans 12 will go on to contrast the lifestyle of the world with Christian principles. Matthew 16 will predict the suffering of Jesus driven by a corrupt government. Underlying all of these readings, we're reminded that any vengeance belongs solely to God. So this psalm focuses attention away from the everyday world and on our covenant relationship with God, the promised relationship of God saying, I will be your God, you will be my people. Through this prayer, this psalm, we are confronted with the reality that we bear a responsibility for both our moral and our religious integrity. And we're challenged to extend to God an invitation to test that integrity, to tell us how we're doing. not in judgment necessarily, but just to be able to say, okay, here's the test. Here's some things you didn't do quite so well on. Here's some things you did really well on. How do you kind of average out and bring up the things you didn't do quite so well on? If you're a teacher, you know exactly what you look for when you give a test. Well, sometimes it doesn't always feel that way to the student. Although anyone can pray to God, this psalm gently cautions that trusting God is an easier exercise when one can claim integrity. This week's readings call us to extend God's love to the faithless while simultaneously walking, sitting, and acting differently from what the world teaches. Thank you for joining me today as we did some reflecting on the Psalm for Sunday, the 13th Sunday after Pentecost, August the 30th, 2020. Have a great day. Take care. God bless.